Rainwater will always find a way to run off any landscape. That process is called erosion. It is normal, modifies landscapes over a long period of time, but can also create a lot of damage and turn a fertile landscape into a desert. A swale is a landscape feature that helps to retain water. It is similar to a ditch, but it is stuck on the contour of the land. That prevents the water from flowing anywhere. The purpose of the swale is to hold the water in place, so that it can infiltrate the soil instead of washing it away. In 2018, we observed the flow of rainwater to understand the erosion that's happening better. During heavy rain, water flows away into the nearest creek and takes topsoil with it. If we allow that to happen, nothing can grow, ever. The worst form of erosion happens when water is allowed to pick up speed. All this precious water could nurture plants, but it's rapidly leaving our land into a few more creeks, then into a nearby river, and eventually into the Mediterranean Sea. It takes with it all the topsoil and nutrients. As we have observed the loss of water and topsoil several times, we set out to dig a number of swales and make other modifications to the landscape to improve it and help nature to regenerate fertility. Our farm in Zone C has a steep slope. On top of it, we have a bit of soil that is not perfect, but can be improved. On the slope itself, all the soil has been washed away, and what's left is only stones. In February 2019, we wanted to do something quick at the most affected location, in order to catch some of the winter and spring rainfall, and to stop the resulting erosion. Swales can have many different sizes. For the larger ones, bigger equipment than our backhoe is helpful. But we make do with what we have, and so we started to dig a few simple trenches to at least make the water not run downhill anymore. At present, these trenches stop erosion in its tracks, but don't do much else. We've seen a bit of standing water after heavy rainfall, but in general they don't hold water. Either because the ground below is so dry that it takes a huge amount of water to saturate, or it is porous and allows the water to simply flow away. Whatever the reason, we continue to observe and see what nature will do with the opportunity we have created by digging these trenches. The drone shots you are seeing were taken in April 2019. Now let's go forward in time and see what nature has achieved a year later. The trenches have turned into this. The berms were mostly dirt and stones, but due to the presence of some seeds and the lack of erosion on the berms, they were able to germinate and grow into these wildflowers. Look to the right of the picture and you can see that there is a difference between the plant growth below the trench and above the trench. The growth is better below the trench, which is exactly why we dug these trenches. They do stop erosion and allow the plants to take advantage of the water that falls from the sky. When I was digging in this area, I came quickly to a layer of clay and decided to make the swale wider so that it becomes a bit more like a pond. It does hold the water for a long time. That's exactly what we want. This way the roots of the plants establishing themselves on the downhill berm can tap into this water source. We've also gotten a lot of wildflowers, and somehow you can tell that our intervention further uphill did make a difference. You can also see that nature is trying to cover all the exposed soil with something. If we follow this swale a bit further ahead, you see the positive effect a swale can have on a sloped and degraded landscape even better. Here in Andalusia it does rain quite a bit. The difference to other regions is that the rainfall is not distributed evenly over the year, but instead there is a pronounced dry period during summer. That's part of the Mediterranean climate. I've checked rainfall data and I can tell that our place gets the same amount of water as in many parts of Germany. Germany is pretty green because there is rain during summer. A dry period during summer, however, does not mean the soil has to be dry, and much less does it mean plants have to die because of it. But they do when there isn't enough shade, no water stored in the soil due to lack of humus. That's called desertification, but it can be reversed with some effort, which is what we have started to do. Once again in December 2019, I'm walking the land with the camera in hand. I want to know where the water goes. This water is coming out of our zone C and is funneled into this little ditch. The ditch goes under the fence onto the neighbor's land, passes between a few rocks and then enters our zone B again. From there, it will join a temporary creek and disappear. By reading the land earlier, I figured that already. The neighbor has a similar situation and had dug a pond right above our zone B to also store the rainwater. We get a bit of overflow from that pond when it rains heavily. As we needed some soil elsewhere, I used the backhoe to deepen the ditch a bit. Now the water that flows out of our zone C is kept in our zone B a little bit longer. Let's go back to zone C and find out where all that water in the ditch actually comes from. I was bringing some straw to the cows in zone C and got stuck in quicksand. Where does that quicksand come from all of a sudden? Now that I was stuck with my backhoe, the first thing to do was to get it free. As I was trying to do so, I left a lot of marks on the land. Initially, I was trying to drive it out with some assistance by the excavator arm to push it ahead or drag it backwards. The cows were not that impressed by my efforts. They took advantage of the straw I managed to bring them. 2 days later I came back. There was no rain. The holes I made during my intent to free the backhoe were all full with water. That explains where all that water in the ditch came from. The whole zone C gets soaked full with water and then, because there is no humus, but mostly sand, it leaks and leaks for days until all the water has drained into the creek. Then the sand dries, and because it does have a bit of clay content, it turns into some sort of a big brick. No wonder that there isn't much grass grows. But it can be fixed with water retention in swales so that the water infiltrates slowly, and in combination with many new plants that can use that water to grow. That way, we can retain enough water to survive the yearly summer drought. After a while messing around with my little problem, I decided that this must be the place where I should be digging a swale. And so I started digging all the sand-water mix out until I reached some more solid ground. I was then able to drive out of the worst part, and with some assistance by the boom of the excavator, I was able to leave the scene for good. The cool thing about owning a backhoe is that you can work whenever you have a bit of free time for digging. In January, a few weeks later, I got back to the place and began to dig a wide version. The idea behind this swale is that it will separate two paddocks. There will be a path for animals to walk on and the uphill side of it. If they want, they can also walk inside the ditch. We will plant a lot of things on the berm. The berm is going to be wide and we will establish a food forest there, with lots of vegetables and other edibles. To protect that from the animals, we are going to use electric fencing as we are doing elsewhere already. Some people may ask what a swale and a food forest does to the existing oak trees. In Spanish they are called encinas. Our land is a Dejesa, which means it is an open forest where for centuries people have been bringing their cows, pigs, goats and sheep to take advantage of the natural resources. It is a forest. Unfortunately, it is in bad shape because it has become a bit too open. There is hardly any shade left And with temperatures above 40 degrees centigrade, during summer, many plants shut down. Even the oak trees suffer, and that in turn hurts the acorn production. And thus is a problem for the jamón ibérico, the famous and expensive ham from this area. What in Spain is called Dejesa, which is a term in Spanish for a plot of land to be used for running animals on, is called differently in other languages. Here's a picture from a Utterwild in Germany. The German language term Utterwild has pretty much the same meaning as Dejesa in Spanish. And note the difference. The canopy of this forest is much denser. The trees, which happen to be oak trees of a different variety, are planted in rows, and the grass below looks lush. Because of the denser canopy, there is much less evaporation of water from the soil, and thus the grass can stay cooler and be grazed for longer. As you can see, it is in our very own best interest to fix the issue. Like I said before, no water, no fertility. At the moment, the swale doesn't look well rounded, pun intended. The sides are pretty steep. We plan on using the pigs to take care of that. They cannot sweat and need a pond nearby to cool down during summer. So we will delegate the work of smoothing the edges to a group of pigs during the next spring and summer, when the swale is still filled with enough water. These guys will certainly just love that. We used the pigs to improve the land before. This was an experimental pond that we dug for the pigs. 10 months earlier there was bare soil around and the area didn't have a lot of grass cows. A few months later it looks like this, and the cows were able to graze off the surrounding area several times. Swales and ponds and other forms of water retention play a huge role in regenerative agriculture. Fertility is the most important value on a farm. Please come back soon to see how the farm evolves. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. See you soon!